During the night shift at a roadside motel, you learn to expect silence. Long hallways, flickering lights, and the occasional late check-in. But sometimes, a guest arrives who is never supposed to be there. A name appears in the registry with no record of payment. A room is occupied, yet no one was ever seen entering. And in some cases, a guest checks in, but never checks out. These are not urban legends. They are testimonies from those who worked alone through the longest hours of the night and lived to question what they experienced. Hello, little ravens. Tonight, we step into the unsettling silence of the motel night shift. Let us go. I had been working the night shift at the Red Valley Motel for almost a year when it happened. The place sat along a forgotten stretch of highway, surrounded by dense woods and miles of empty asphalt. Most nights were quiet, just the hum of the neon sign and the occasional trucker needing a few hours of sleep. It was lonely but predictable. Until that night. It was just past 2 a.m. when a man walked into the lobby. I didn't hear a car pull up, which was unusual because the gravel parking lot always announced every arrival. He simply appeared in the doorway, standing beneath the flickering fluorescent light. He was tall, pale, and dressed in a dark coat despite the warm summer air. When he approached the counter, I noticed something unsettling. His clothes were perfectly dry, yet there was a faint smell of damp earth surrounding him, like soil after heavy rain. He avoided eye contact and spoke in a low, calm voice. "I'd like a room for the night," he said. I handed him the registry book. As he signed, I saw the name Daniel Harper written in careful, deliberate handwriting. His fingers were unnaturally cold when they brushed against mine as he returned the pen. I assigned him room 13, mostly out of habit. It was rarely used, and guests often avoided it because of the number. I gave him the key and watched as he walked down the corridor. The security monitor showed him entering the room, and then the door closed behind him. Everything seemed normal, yet an inexplicable sense of dread settled over me. The lobby suddenly felt colder, and the usual background noises faded into an oppressive silence. About an hour later, the phone at the front desk rang. The caller ID indicated it was room 13. I answered, expecting a routine request for towels or extra blankets. Instead, there was only silence on the other end, followed by a faint rhythmic sound. It took me a moment to realize what it resembled. Breathing, slow, uneven, as if someone was struggling to draw air into their lungs. "Sir, is everything okay?" I asked. The breathing stopped abruptly, and the line went dead. Trying to dismiss the unease, I checked the security monitors. The hallway outside room 13 was empty. No movement, no shadows, nothing. I told myself it was just a prank or a technical issue, but the tension in my chest refused to subside. Around 4 a.m., I decided to perform a routine check of the property. Armed with a flashlight, I walked down the corridor toward room 13. The air grew noticeably colder with each step, and the smell of damp earth returned, stronger than before. When I reached the door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. I hesitated before knocking. "Front desk," I called out. "Is everything all right?" There was no response. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made, untouched, and the bathroom light was off. The only sign that anyone had been there was the key resting on the nightstand. A chill ran down my spine as I realized there was no possible way the guest could have left without passing the front desk. Confused, I returned to the lobby and reviewed the security footage. The recording clearly showed Daniel Harper entering room 13 earlier that night. However, there was no footage of him leaving. I rewound the video several times, searching for any anomaly, but the result was always the same. He had entered the room and simply vanished. As dawn approached, I tried to rationalize what had happened. Perhaps there had been a malfunction in the camera system. or maybe the guest had slipped out through a blind spot. Still, the unease lingered. Later that morning, when the day manager arrived, I explained the situation. Concerned, she contacted the local authorities. They ran the name Daniel Harper through their database, and what they discovered made my blood run cold. A man by that name had died in a car accident on the very stretch of highway near the motel 10 years earlier. According to the report, his vehicle had veered off the road during a storm and crashed into the woods. His body was never recovered. I tried to convince myself it was merely a coincidence. But that night, as I prepared to leave my shift, something else happened. While organizing the paperwork, I opened the registry book to remove the previous night's entries. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the page where Daniel Harper had signed. The ink had changed. What was once a neat signature had smeared into dark, muddy streaks, as if written with wet soil instead of ink. Beneath the distorted name, a new message had appeared, one that I was certain had not been there before. Still here. Panicking, I checked the security monitors once more. The hallway was empty, except for a single detail that made my stomach drop. The door to room 13, which had been closed earlier, was now slowly creaking open on its own. I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, but before I could move, the phone rang again. With trembling hands, I answered. This time, there was no breathing, only a whisper, faint and close, as if someone were standing right behind me. "Why didn't you check me out?" I spun around, but the lobby was empty. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, and for a brief moment, the monitors displayed a distorted image of a figure standing inside room 13 motionless, facing the camera. Then the screens went black. I quit my job the next day and never returned to the Red Valley Motel. Months later, I learned that the building had been demolished after a fire of unknown origin. Yet sometimes, when I drive along that deserted highway, I swear I can still see the faint glow of a neon sign in the distance. And in my nightmares, the registry book always lies open to the same page, with a muddy signature that never fades, reminding me that some guests don't just check in, they stay. If a guest checked into your motel, but never appeared in any record of the living, would you have the courage to stay? And if the phone rang in the middle of the night, would you answer it? Some places seem to remember those who were never meant to leave. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're drawn to true horror, subscribe and join the archive of Little Ravens. I started working the night shift at the Pine Crest Motel after moving to a small town in northern Arizona. It wasn't the kind of place people visited unless they had to. The motel sat just off a long, empty highway, surrounded by desert and silence. During the day, it looked tired but harmless. At night, it felt like something forgotten by time. My shifts ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights were uneventful. A few truckers would check in, sometimes a weary traveler passing through, but there were long stretches of time when the world seemed to disappear entirely. The quiet was so complete that even the ticking of the wall clock sounded intrusive. About a month into the job, I began noticing something strange in the guest registry. Every few nights, the name Evelyn Moore appeared, always assigned to room 7. What struck me as odd was that I had never seen her check in. There were no payments recorded, no identification scanned, and none of my coworkers remembered interacting with her. At first, I assumed it was a clerical error. Perhaps the day staff had made a mistake or reused an old record. But the entries continued, always in the same elegant handwriting, and always during the night shift. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived for work, I checked the system and saw that room 7 was listed as occupied again under the name Evelyn Moore. Determined to resolve the mystery, I decided to call the room. The phone rang several times before being answered. I expected a greeting, but instead, I was met with silence. Then, after a few seconds, a soft whisper came through the line. "Yes?" The voice was faint and distant, as though it were traveling from the far end of a long tunnel. "Good evening," I said, trying to keep my tone professional. "This is the front desk. I just wanted to confirm that everything in your room is satisfactory." There was a pause, followed by a quiet response. "It's perfect. Thank you." Before I could say anything else, the line went dead. The interaction left me unsettled, but I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps she was simply an introverted guest who preferred privacy. Still, something about the conversation felt deeply wrong, especially the way her voice seemed to echo, as if the room itself were speaking. Later that night, during my routine patrol of the property, I walked toward room 7. The corridor leading to it was dimly lit, and the air felt noticeably colder than the rest of the building. As I approached the door, I noticed a faint humming sound coming from inside, like someone quietly singing to themselves. I hesitated before knocking. The humming stopped instantly. "Front desk," I called out. "Is everything all right?" No response. I raised my hand to knock again when the door slowly creaked open on its own. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the pale glow of the bathroom light. Gathering my courage, I stepped inside. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, the curtains were drawn, and there was no sign that anyone had been there. Yet the air was thick with the scent of old perfume sweet but decayed, like flowers left too long in a vase. On the nightstand sat an antique hairbrush and a faded photograph of a young woman I had never seen before. As I picked up the photograph, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The bathroom door slammed shut behind me, causing me to jump. When I turned back toward the entrance, the main door had also closed, trapping me inside. Panic surged through me as I rushed to the door and pulled it open. The corridor outside was empty, but the overhead lights flickered violently. I quickly returned to the front desk, trying to convince myself that stress and fatigue were playing tricks on my mind. The next morning, I reported the incident to the motel's owner. He listened silently before revealing something that made my blood run cold. Evelyn Moore, he explained, had been a guest at the Pinecrest Motel over 20 years earlier. She had checked into room 7 while fleeing an abusive relationship. A few days later, she was found dead in the room under mysterious circumstances. The case was ruled a suicide, though many locals believed there was more to the story. Disturbed by this revelation, I considered quitting my job. However, financial necessity forced me to stay. Over the following weeks, the occurrences became more frequent. The registry continued to display Evelyn's name, and the phone would occasionally ring from room 7, despite the room being officially unoccupied. One night, around 3 a.m., the security alarm was triggered. The system indicated movement inside room 7. Reluctantly, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way down the corridor. As I approached, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. A faint light flickered inside, accompanied by the sound of quiet sobbing. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open. This time, the room was not empty. A woman sat on the edge of the bed, her back turned toward me. She wore a pale blue dress, and her long dark hair cascaded over her shoulders. The air was unbearably cold, and the scent of perfume was overwhelming. "Ma'am?" I whispered. The sobbing stopped. Slowly, she began to turn her head toward me, but before I could see her face, the lights went out completely. The room was plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, and when its beam finally illuminated the bed, the woman was gone. In her place, the sheets were now violently twisted, as though someone had struggled there moments before. Etched into the mirror above the dresser were 3 words, written from the inside. "He found me." Terrified, I fled the room and locked myself in the front office until sunrise. Determined to uncover the truth, I later researched Evelyn Moore's death. Old newspaper articles revealed that her abusive partner had indeed tracked her down to the motel. Although he was questioned by police, insufficient evidence prevented his arrest. He disappeared shortly after the investigation, and the case remained unsolved. The final and most horrifying incident occurred during my last week at the motel. At approximately 2:45 a.m., the phone rang at the front desk. The caller ID displayed room 7 once again. With trembling hands, I answered. This time, the voice was clearer than before. "Please help me," she whispered. "He's here." Before I could respond, a second voice emerged on the line, deep, distorted, and filled with malice. "You shouldn't have come back." The call ended abruptly. Moments later, the security monitors flickered to life, displaying live footage from room 7. I watched in horror as the door slowly opened on its own. Inside, the shadowy figure of a man appeared, dragging something across the floor. The image distorted with static, but I could clearly see a woman's hand reaching out before being pulled into the darkness. Summoning every ounce of courage, I called the police. When they arrived and searched the room, they found nothing, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. The officers attributed the incident to a malfunction in the security system. However, as they were preparing to leave, one of them noticed something unusual. On the guest registry at the front desk, a fresh entry had appeared. Written in the same elegant handwriting were 2 names, Evelyn Moore, and beneath it, my own. I resigned from my position the very next day. Months later, while unpacking boxes in my new apartment, I discovered the faded photograph I had seen in room 7, though I was certain I had never taken it with me. On the back of the photo, a message had been written in delicate script. "Thank you for seeing me." But as I turned the photograph over once more, a second message slowly began to appear beneath the first, as if written by an unseen hand. "He sees you too." I never returned to Pine Crest, but even now, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night to the faint scent of old perfume lingering in the air. And when the phone rings at exactly 2:45 a.m., I never answer it. Because deep down, I know that some guests are not just searching for a place to stay, they're searching for someone to replace them. If a name appeared in the guest registry without anyone ever checking in, would you dare investigate? And if someone asked for your help from beyond the past, would you answer? Some places don't just hold memories, they hold unfinished stories. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're drawn to true horror, subscribe and become part of the Little Ravens. The next story will be the most terrifying you've ever heard. Will you dare to listen? I took the night shift at the Silver Pines Motel because I needed the money, not because I wanted the job. The motel stood alone beside a forgotten highway, surrounded by dense forest that seemed to swallow all sound after sunset. During the day, it looked merely outdated. At night, it felt abandoned by the world, as if time itself had stopped there. The manager gave me a brief tour on my first evening. As we passed the row of rooms, I noticed that every door was numbered sequentially, except for one at the very end. The space where the final number should have been was empty. When I asked about it, the manager hesitated before replying, "That room doesn't exist anymore. Just ignore it." I assumed it was a structural issue, or perhaps a room under renovation. Still, the omission lingered in my mind. After the manager left, the silence of the property became overwhelming. The only sounds were the distant hum of the highway and the occasional creak of the old building settling into the night. Around 1:30 a.m., a man entered the lobby. I hadn't heard a vehicle arrive, which immediately unsettled me. He appeared disoriented, his clothes dusty and his face pale. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for something unseen. "I need a room," he said urgently. "The last one you have." I checked the system. Strangely, all rooms were listed as occupied, even though the parking lot was nearly empty. As I scrolled through the registry, a new entry suddenly appeared on the screen without any input from me. Room 27. Yet, according to the layout, the motel only had 26 rooms. Confused but pressured by the man's insistence, I handed him a key that had been lying in the drawer, one I was certain hadn't been there before. The tag attached to it was worn and unmarked. Without another word, the man took the key and walked toward the far end of the property, disappearing into the darkness beyond the last visible door. Minutes later, the power flickered. When it stabilized, I noticed that the security monitors displayed an additional camera feed labeled Room 27. The image showed a dimly lit interior, though the angle was distorted, making it difficult to discern details. The man stood in the center of the room, facing the wall, completely motionless. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I tried to rationalize the situation as a technical malfunction, but the unease in my chest continued to grow. At 2:17 a.m., the phone rang. The caller ID read Room 27. With trembling hands, I answered. Instead of a voice, I heard a cacophony of whispers layered over one another. Some sounded like desperate pleas, others like anguished screams. Beneath the noise, I could distinguish the man's voice repeating a single phrase. "They're already here." The line abruptly disconnected. Unable to ignore the situation, I grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside. The night air was unnaturally cold, and the forest surrounding the motel seemed to press closer with each step. As I reached the end of the row of rooms, I saw something impossible. Where there should have been a solid wall, there was now a door. The number 27 was crudely carved into the wood, as if etched by hand. A faint, sickly light seeped from beneath it. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but a compulsion stronger than fear drove me forward. I knocked once. The whispers immediately ceased. Slowly, the door creaked open. Inside, the room appeared far larger than the motel structure should have allowed. The walls were stained and covered with countless scratch marks, as though something had desperately tried to escape. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the temperature dropped so drastically that my breath became visible. The man stood in the center of the room, exactly as he had appeared on the monitor. "Sir?" I called out. He began to turn toward me, his movements unnaturally slow. When his face finally came into view, my heart nearly stopped. His expression was frozen in terror, and his eyes were wide and lifeless. Deep, shadowy handprints covered his arms, as if unseen figures were gripping him. "They said someone else had to take my place," he whispered. Before I could respond, the door slammed shut behind me. The whispers returned, louder than before, now clearly forming words. "Stay, stay." The walls seemed to pulse, and shadowy silhouettes began to emerge from the darkness surrounding the man. He screamed as the figures pulled him backward, his body dissolving into the shadows until nothing remained. I rushed to the door, but it would not budge. Panic surged through me as the whispers shifted their attention toward me. The temperature plummeted further, and I felt invisible hands brushing against my skin. In the corner of the room, I noticed a desk with an old registry book. Desperate for any explanation, I opened it. The pages were filled with hundreds of names, each followed by a date, but none indicated a checkout. As I turned the final page, I felt my blood run cold. At the bottom, written in fresh ink, was my own name. The whispers intensified, now forming a single chilling sentence. "You're next." Summoning every ounce of strength, I slammed the book shut. At that exact moment, the door burst open, and I stumbled back into the corridor. When I turned around, the door to room 27 was gone, replaced once again by the motel's exterior wall. Shaken and disoriented, I returned to the lobby. The security monitors no longer displayed the additional camera feed, and the system showed no record of room 27 ever existing. The key the man had taken was also missing from the drawer. I immediately resigned from my position and left the town the following morning. For months, I tried to convince myself that the experience had been a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. However, the nightmares began soon after. In them, I find myself standing in an endless corridor of motel rooms, each door marked with a different number. From behind every door, I hear the same desperate whispers, calling my name. The most disturbing part is what happens when I wake up. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., I hear 3 slow knocks on my bedroom door. When I gather the courage to look, there is never anyone there. Yet on the floor, just outside the door, a single object always appears: an unmarked motel key. I have moved several times since that night, changing cities and even states, but the knocking continues. Recently, I noticed that the key has begun to change. A faint number is gradually appearing on its surface, becoming clearer with each passing night. Last evening, the number was finally legible: 27. I no longer sleep. I keep the lights on and avoid answering any knocks after midnight, because deep down, I understand what the man meant when he said someone else had to take his place. And I know that sooner or later, the door to that room will appear again, no matter where I am. When it does, I'm not sure I'll be able to escape a second time, because some places don't exist on any map. They wait patiently, collecting their guests, one by one, and eventually, every name in that registry gets a room, but no one ever checks out. If a door appeared where no room should exist, would you have the courage to open it? And if your name was written in a registry with no way out, what would you do? Some places don't just offer shelter, they choose their guests. Tell me in the comments what you believe was waiting inside room 27. Thank you for spending this night with me, little ravens. If these true motel night shift stories left you unsettled, don't forget to subscribe and become part of our growing archive of real horror. Your support helps keep these testimonies alive. On the end screen, you'll find 2 more terrifying videos waiting for you. Perfect if you're not ready to sleep just yet. Stay alert, stay curious, because the night is never as empty as it seems.